When people say a single bad decision can change your life forever, I used to laugh it off. How could one choice, one small, seemingly insignificant choice, lead to something catastrophic? But now I know better. I learned it the hard way. Let me take you back to the night that changed everything. It started with a text. Hey man, you down for a midnight drive? Got something cool to show you. The message was from Jake, my best friend since high school. Jake was impulsive, a thrill seeker, the kind of guy who'd see a do not enter sign and take it as a personal challenge. I wasn't like him, not usually. But that night I was bored, restless, maybe even a little reckless. So I texted back, sure, what's the plan? 20 minutes later, Jake pulled up outside my house in his old Jeep, the engine growling like a hungry animal. You're gonna love this, he said, grinning like a kid, with a secret. We drove out of town, past the quiet neighborhoods, and into the countryside. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the endless fields. Jake wouldn't tell me where we were going, just kept saying, trust me. I should have known better. About an hour later, we pulled up to a gated dirt road. A rusted sign hung from the gate. No trespassing. This is it, Jake said, hopping out of the Jeep. What is this place? I asked, hesitating. You'll see. Come on. Against my better judgment, I followed him. He pried open the gate. It wasn't even locked. And we started down the overgrown path. The trees closed in around us, their gnarled branches like skeletal fingers. The only sounds were our footsteps and the occasional hoot of an owl. After about 10 minutes, we reached a clearing, and there it was, an old abandoned amusement park. The place looked like it had been swallowed by time. Rusted rides loomed in the moonlight, their skeletal frames creaking in the wind. The carousel sat in the center, its paint faded, its horses frozen mid-gallop. A Ferris wheel towered over everything, its cabin swaying gently as if moved by an invisible hand. This is insane, I whispered. Cool, right? Jake said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. I heard about this place from some guy online. It's been shut down for decades. Nobody comes here anymore. Yeah, for a reason, I muttered. But Jake was already moving deeper into the park. I followed reluctantly, my nerves prickling with unease. We wandered through the park, Jake snapping photos on his phone while I tried to shake the feeling that we were being watched. It wasn't just the creepy atmosphere. The shadows seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. And every so often, I'd hear a faint whisper, like the wind, carrying words I couldn't quite make out. Then we reached the funhouse. It stood at the edge of the park, its once bright facade now faded and peeling. The entrance was a gaping clown mouth, its painted smile cracked and sinister. Let's check it out, Jake said, already heading inside. Dude, I don't know about this. Come on, don't be a wuss. With a sigh, I followed him in. The air inside was stale, heavy, with the scent of mildew and decay. The floorboards creaked under our weight, and the distorted mirrors lining the walls cast warped reflections that made my skin crawl. This place is wild, Jake said, his voice echoing in the empty space. I didn't respond. I was too focused on the feeling that had been growing since we arrived, that we weren't alone. We turned a corner, and that's when I saw it. A figure stood at the far end of the hall, half hidden in the shadows. It was tall and thin, its limbs unnaturally long, its head tilted at an impossible angle. Jake, I whispered, grabbing his arm. What? Do you see that? He followed my gaze, and for a moment, his bravado faltered. "It's probably just a mannequin," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. The figure moved. It was subtle, just a slight tilt of the head, but it was enough to send my heart racing. "Let's get out of here," I said, my voice trembling. Jake nodded, for once not arguing. We turned to leave, but the way we came in was gone. The hall stretched endlessly in both directions, the mirrors reflecting our panic back at us. "What the hell is going on?" Jake muttered, spinning in circles. A low guttural laugh echoed through the funhouse. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Jake's arm and dragging him forward. We sprinted down the hall, the laughter growing louder, closer. The walls seemed to close in around us, the mirrors distorting our reflections into grotesque shapes. Finally, we burst through a door and stumbled outside. The night air hit me like a slap, and for a moment, I thought we were safe. Then I heard it, a scraping sound like metal on metal. I turned, and there it was, standing at the edge of the clearing. Watching us, Jake didn't wait. He bolted for the jeep, and I was right behind him. We didn't stop until we were miles away. The abandoned park, just a bad memory in the rearview mirror. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear that laughter. And I know one thing for sure. I'll never ignore a no trespassing sign again. If you think I learned my lesson after that night, you'd be wrong. Sometimes curiosity gets the better of you. Or maybe it's arrogance. The belief that the bad things only happen to other people. A month after Jake and I barely escaped that cursed amusement park, I made another mistake. Another bad decision. And this time, it wasn't Jake who dragged me into it. I did it to myself. It started with an app. You know, those urban exploration forums where people share photos of abandoned places? I joined one after our amusement park ordeal, partly to make sense of what had happened, and partly to convince myself it was just my imagination. One night, scrolling through the forum, I came across a thread about Nyapanda, the Blackwood Tunnel. The post was vague, filled with cryptic warnings and shaky photos. Apparently, it was an old railway tunnel, hidden deep in the woods, long abandoned, and rumored to be haunted. The locals said anyone who ventured inside never came back out. Most of the replies were jokes or dismissals, but one comment stood out. "The tunnel's real. I've been there. You just have to know where to look. DM me if you're serious." Without thinking, I sent a message. The person replied almost immediately, giving me coordinates and a single piece of advice. Don't go alone. But I didn't tell Jake this time. I didn't tell anyone. I convinced myself it was just an adventure, a chance to prove I wasn't scared. The next evening, armed with a flashlight and my phone, I set out for Blackwood Tunnel. The drive took me far outside the city, down winding roads and through dense woods. By the time I reached the coordinates, the sun was dipping below the horizon, bathing the forest in a dim golden light. I parked my car at the edge of an overgrown trail and started walking. The path was barely visible, choked with weeds and branches. As the light faded, the woods grew darker, quieter. My footsteps seemed unnaturally loud, the crunch of leaves echoing like gunshots. Finally, I saw it. The tunnel emerged from the shadows like the mouth of some great beast, its black maw framed by crumbling stone. Vines draped over the entrance, and graffiti scrawled across the walls warned of danger. "Turn back. They watch. Not safe." I hesitated, my gut screaming at me to leave, but I pushed forward, stepping into the darkness. The air inside was cold and damp, carrying the faint scent of rust and decay. My flashlight beam cut through the blackness, illuminating the curved walls and the warped tracks that disappeared into the void. I told myself it was just an old tunnel, nothing to be scared of. But the deeper I went, the more that feeling returned. The one I'd felt in the amusement park. The feeling of being watched. About 50 feet in, I found the first sign that I wasn't alone. A shoe. It was lying on the ground, coated in dust, the laces frayed and brittle. It looked like it had been there for years. My stomach churned, but I kept going. Then I found the backpack. It was propped against the wall, the fabric torn, the zippers broken. I crouched down, my flashlight trembling in my hand, and opened it. Inside, I found a wallet, a phone, and a notebook. The phone was dead, but the notebook was intact. Flipping through it, I saw frantic, scribbled entries. I hear them. The whispers won't stop. Something's in here with me. I slammed the notebook shut, my pulse racing. That's when I heard it. A faint tapping sound, like fingernails on metal. It echoed from deeper within the tunnel, growing louder, closer. "Hello?" I called, my voice shaking. No response. Just the tapping, steady and deliberate. I backed away, my flashlight flickering. The tapping stopped. For a moment there was only silence, then a whisper. "Why did you come?" It wasn't a voice I recognized. It wasn't even human. It was guttural, distorted, like something speaking through a broken radio. I turned and ran. The tunnel seemed endless, the entrance farther than I remembered. My flashlight died, plunging me into darkness. I could hear the whispers now, dozens of them, overlapping, calling my name. I stumbled, fell, and scrambled to my feet. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath ragged. Finally, I saw it, the faint glow of moonlight spilling into the tunnel. I sprinted toward it, the whispers rising to a deafening roar. As I burst out into the open air, the noise stopped. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath, the cold night air stinging my lungs. Behind me, the tunnel loomed, silent and still, as if nothing had happened, but I knew better. I didn't wait to see what might follow. I ran back to my car, jumped in, and sped away, vowing never to return. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw shadows moving, heard the whispers echoing in my head. The next day, I went back to the forum, desperate for answers. The thread about Blackwood Tunnel was gone. So was the user who'd sent me the coordinates. It's been weeks now, and I can't shake the feeling that I didn't come back alone. At night, I hear the tapping, faint but unmistakable, and sometimes, when I look into the shadows, I see movement. I thought I was chasing an adventure, a story to tell, but what I found was something far worse, and now, no matter where I go, I know it's still with me. There's something about helping strangers that feels noble, right? Until it isn't. I've always believed in lending a hand when someone needs it, no questions asked. That belief cost me more than I ever imagined. It was a rainy Thursday night, the kind that makes the world feel small and quiet. I was driving home after a late shift, the roads slick and shining under the glare of my headlights. The clock on my dashboard blinked 11:43 p.m. As I rounded a curve on the deserted highway, I saw her. A woman stood by the side of the road, drenched from head to toe, her hair plastered to her face. She was waving frantically, her other hand clutching a tattered bag. Instinctively, I slowed down. I rolled down the window, the cold rain hitting my arm. Are you okay? Do you need a ride? Her voice was shaky, barely audible over the rain. Please, my car broke down. I need to get to town. She looked harmless, just a young woman caught in a bad situation. I hesitated for a moment, then unlocked the passenger door. Hop in. She climbed in, shivering, her clothes dripping onto the seat. Thank you, she whispered. You're a lifesaver. We drove in silence for a while. The rain was relentless, pounding against the windshield. She stared out the window, her fingers clutching her bag tightly. Something about her unease began to seep into me. So, where were you headed? I asked, trying to break the tension. Just into town, she said quickly. Anywhere is fine. Her vague answer made me uncomfortable, but I shrugged it off. Maybe she was just shaken up. A few minutes later, she spoke again. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you believe in fate? Her question caught me off guard. I guess. Why? She turned to me, her eyes dark and unreadable. Sometimes, fate puts you exactly where you're meant to be, even if it's not where you want to be. I forced a nervous laugh. That's one way to look at it. She didn't say anything else, just went back to staring out the window. About 10 minutes later, she suddenly pointed. Stop here. We were in the middle of nowhere, a narrow dirt road cutting through dense woods. There were no houses, no signs of civilization, just trees, their branches swaying in the wind like skeletal arms. Here? I asked, confused. Yes. Please, just stop. I pulled over reluctantly. She grabbed her bag and got out without another word. Before I could say anything, she was gone, disappearing into the darkness. I sat there for a moment, the rain hammering against the car. Something about the whole thing felt wrong. Then I saw it. Her bag. She'd left it on the seat. I grabbed it, stepping out into the rain. Hey, you forgot your... The words died in my throat. She was nowhere to be seen. I stood there, drenched and confused, clutching the bag. My instincts told me to leave, to drive away and forget about her. But curiosity won. Back in the car, I opened the bag. Inside was a single object, a small ornate wooden box. It was old, the wood dark and polished, with intricate carvings I couldn't quite make out. I should have left it alone, but I didn't. The box had no latch, just a lid that lifted easily. When I opened it, I saw nothing. It was empty. Disappointed and annoyed, I set the box on the seat beside me and started the car. As I pulled back onto the road, a strange feeling settled over me, like I was being watched. The first sign that something was wrong came about 5 minutes later. The rain stopped abruptly. The road, the trees, even the air seemed unnaturally still. My headlights illuminated the path ahead, but everything beyond them was pitch black, as if the night itself had swallowed the world. Then my radio crackled to life. Static filled the car, loud and jarring. I reached for the dial, but before I could turn it off, a voice emerged from the noise. You shouldn't have opened it. I froze. The voice wasn't mine. It wasn't even human. It was deep and guttural, vibrating through the car like a growl. The static cut off, leaving me in silence. That's when I saw her. She was standing in the middle of the road, the same woman I'd picked up. But something was different. Her posture was wrong, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop just inches away from her. She didn't move. I honked the horn. Get out of the way. Slowly, she turned to face me. Her eyes were gone, replaced by empty black voids. Then she smiled. Before I could react, The box on the seat began to rattle. It shook violently, the lid snapping open and shut like a hungry mouth. The car filled with whispers, overlapping and indecipherable. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, growing darker, closer. I grabbed the box and threw it out the window. The whispers stopped instantly, the shadows retreating. But when I looked back at the road, she was gone. I didn't wait. I drove as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached the safety of my driveway. That night, I locked every door and window. But it didn't help. I could still feel her presence, could still hear the faint whispers echoing in my ears. The next morning, the box was on my porch. I didn't touch it. I didn't even leave the house. But no matter what I do, I can't escape the feeling that she's still watching, waiting. I made one bad decision that night, one small mistake. And now, I don't know if I'll ever be free of it. Looking back, it's hard not to wonder why I kept making these bad decisions. Was it stubbornness, arrogance, or just plain foolishness? Each time, I thought I was in control, that I could handle whatever came my way. But the truth is, some doors are meant to stay closed. After the woman with the box, I stopped chasing the thrill. The whispers didn't go away immediately, and for weeks I was haunted by shadows flickering just beyond my vision. I had nightmares about the tunnel, the amusement park, and her, standing in the rain, smiling that empty, chilling smile. One night, in desperation, I searched for answers. Not on forums, not from strangers, but within myself. I asked the question I had been too afraid to confront. Why did I let this happen? The answer wasn't easy to face. I wanted to prove something, to myself, to the world, that I was brave, curious, unshaken by fear. But bravery without wisdom is just recklessness, and curiosity without caution can be deadly. Each of these experiences taught me something. The amusement park. Not all mysteries need to be solved. Some places are abandoned for a reason. The tunnel. When warnings are ignored, you're inviting danger to follow you. The box. Helping someone blindly without understanding the risks can cost you more than you're willing to pay. These weren't just stories. They were lessons written in fear, mistakes, and near misses. I don't go looking for the extraordinary anymore. I stay away from urban legends, abandoned places, and strangers in the middle of nowhere. If curiosity knocks, I remind myself of the cost. But more importantly, I've learned to listen to instincts, to warnings, and to that small voice in the back of my mind that whispers, "Stop. Think. Don't do this." I can't undo the past, and the scars of those nights will always stay with me. But I've chosen to learn from them, to live a life guided by caution and respect for the unknown. So, to anyone listening to my story, take this as a warning. Not every adventure is worth the risk. Not every door needs to be opened. And sometimes, walking away is the bravest thing you can do. Because bad decisions have consequences, ones you might not escape.